The Sith are remembered for their weapons of unimaginable power, planet-killing superweapons, artifacts capable of breaking stars, lightsabers forged not only to kill, but to dominate, blades wielded by legends like Sidious, Exar Kun, and Vader himself. The Sith have always sought power through scale, through spectacle, through overwhelming force. But buried deep within their history is a weapon that defies all of that. A weapon so unassuming, so fragile, that it seems almost laughable beside a lightsaber. A weapon not forged to conquer armies, but rather to end individuals. A blade made not of metal, but of glass. It was delicate, it was beautiful, and it was designed to only be used a single time. Yet this single-use dagger inspired a level of fear among the Sith that no superweapon ever could. Because this weapon was never meant for the battlefield, it was meant for betrayal. Forged during the 100-Year Darkness, this blade would become a symbol of everything the Sith feared. Not defeat, but humiliation. Not death, but being deemed unworthy of even a duel. It represented assassination over combat, silence over spectacle, and intention over power. Centuries later, long after its creators were gone, this same kind of weapon would be chosen for a task so audacious that it bordered on sacrilege. A blade meant not for soldiers or rivals, but for the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, Luke Skywalker. And by the end of this video holocron, you'll understand why this fragile glass dagger became one of the most feared weapons that the Sith ever created. The Dark Jedi of the 100-Year Darkness were not exiles of the Republic, at least not at first. They were not cast out wanderers or heretics driven into the void. They were Jedi themselves once, powerful wielders of the Force who still existed within the framework of the Jedi Order and the wider galactic society. They were chosen as protectors. What created the divide was a break in ideology. The conflict that would become the 100-Year Darkness began as a philosophical and a mystical break. These Dark Jedi believed the Force was not meant to be restrained or morally filtered. They sought to reshape reality itself with the Force, experimenting with alchemy, biological manipulation, and the bending of life to one's will. To them, the Jedi were stagnant, afraid of power, and shackled by restraint. As this belief spread, so too did the violence. The Dark Jedi turned their abilities not only against their enemies, but against one another as well. Power became the only measure of truth that they understood. The Force was no longer a guide, it was their weapon, a lab, a means of transcendence even. It was during this era of internal collapse and philosophical warfare that the earliest forms of the dagger known as the Shikkar began to appear. These were weapons not born of exile, they were born of betrayal. Crafted in secret by those who understood the open conflict would destroy them. Shikkars were the tools of assassins, those operating in the ranks of the Dark Jedi themselves. They were designed for silence, precision, and inevitability. They were perfect for eliminating rivals without the need for open war. Only later, after the Dark Jedi were defeated and cast out, did the survivors carry these weapons with them into exile. On worlds like Korriban, the Shikkar evolved from a practical tool of assassination into a symbol of authority, ritual, and eventually even tradition. There, among the tombs and ashes of the Fallen Order, the weapon took on meaning beyond its function. It was a symbol of betrayal sanctified by tradition, a reminder that power was not seized in battle, but could also be taken in the silence. The Shikkar was not a weapon designed for battle, it was designed to go without one. At a glance, it appeared almost delicate. Its blade was long and narrow, formed not of metal, but of glass shaped by the dark side itself through alchemy. Some were clear as frozen air, others carried smoky veins of crimson, violet, or even deep obsidian hues, as though shadows had been trapped inside them during their forging. No two blades were ever identical either. Each Shikkar was unique, shaped not only by the hands of its creator, but by the intent, emotion, and the ritual behind it. The blade was slender, elegant, deceptively beautiful. Many were no longer than a forearm, balanced to slide easily beneath armor or hidden beneath robes. Their surfaces caught the light in strange ways, refracting it into fractured reflections that made the blade seem almost alive. Some were etched with faint Sith sigils or runes, others inlaid with rare minerals or dark gemstones, not for function, but to mark the weapon as something ceremonial, something that meant the end. The crafting of such a blade was pure alchemy, dark side alchemy. It is said that the glass is grown, not forged, coaxed into existence and shape through ritual and will. The Sith believed that intention mattered, that a weapon shaped with hatred and contempt would carry these emotions into the flesh of its victim. The blade was infused with this philosophy from creation, every fracture and imperfection deliberately preserved. Unlike a lightsaber, the Shikkar was never meant to endure, it was designed to break. When driven into the body, the blade shattered on purpose. The glass fragmented inward, spreading through muscle and tissue like a slow, blossoming poison. Removal was impossible without tearing the victim apart. Each movement only drove the fragments deeper, ensuring that death came now more swiftly and painfully. But this was not a battlefield weapon. The Sith knew it. This was an executioner's instrument. To be killed by this blade was not simply to die, but it was to be judged. The act carried with it a message. You are not worthy of a duel, not worthy of effort, not worthy of honor. It was a declaration that the victim had already lost before they ever knew the blade was there. And this is the design. The Sith believed that fear was as powerful as any blade, and few things inspired greater terror than knowing your end had already been decided the moment that you felt the sting. The Shikkar did not kill quickly. It gave its victim time to understand what had been done to them and why. Once the blade shattered and the victim fell, the assassin would simply turn away, because the outcome was assured. The Shikkar terrified the Sith because it represented something they could not dominate. It did not challenge them in combat openly. It didn't announce itself with blazing light or thunderous power. It arrived quietly, slipped past every defense, and ended a Sith life without spectacle. For beings who believed power was proven through strength, dominance, and that precious spectacle, the Shikkar was an insult made manifest. It did not test Sith or mastery. It bypassed both entirely. To be killed by such a weapon meant your power had failed you before the fight ever began. You were not defeated. You were discarded by fate. To the Sith, this was a physical embodiment of betrayal in a weapon, a system where ambition devoured itself. Crafted to break apart inside of the body, it turned death into a slow realization, a moment where all illusions of dominance collapse. The Sith feared the blade because it stripped away the lie at the heart of their ideology, that power guaranteed their survival. The Shikkar proved that even the strongest Sith could be reduced to nothing. Among the Sith, though, it was also massively controversial. Many within Sith society viewed its use as dishonorable, not because it killed, but because of how the kill violated the unspoken hierarchy of power. To rely only on concealment, this was seen by some as beneath a true Dark Lord. In certain eras, especially among the more traditional Sith, the Shikkar was viewed as a weapon of cowards, an insult masquerading as strategy. It was tolerated, even respected for its effectiveness, but it was rarely celebrated. To kill with it was to admit that one could not or would not win openly. But with that, I have a quote from Bane: "Honor is for the dead." But the irony is that the contempt for the blade made it even more potent. It was a tool for those that remembered that power was not always about spectacle. Some Sith believed that to wield it was to transcend the performative theatrics of domination, and to embrace something colder, more absolute. This tension is perhaps best embodied in the legend of Tulak Hord. Though remembered as one of the greatest warriors in Sith history, tradition holds that he was not struck down in glorious combat, but through treachery, possibly even struck by a Shikkar blade, wielded by a lesser being who dared not face him directly. Whether true or not, the implication is damning, that even the mightiest Sith could fall to a weapon considered beneath them. The Sith knew that they would always be betrayed. The last known use of the Shikkar came long after the age that birthed it though, when the lost tribe of the Sith emerged from myth and shadow to confront the galaxy once more. This Sith sect traced all the way back to the origins of the Dark Jedi exiles of the 100-Year Darkness. They were survivors of the ancient schism who fled the Republic and eventually crash-landed on the remote world known as Kesh. Cut off from the wider galaxy for millennia, the tribe preserved fragments of ancient Sith tradition, some rituals, and weapons that had vanished everywhere else in the galaxy. Among these relics was the Shikkar blades, preserved not merely as a weapon though, but as a sacred symbol of Sith judgment. To the lost tribe, The Shikkar represented purity of intent. It's the embodiment of Sith philosophy, untainted by spectacle or theatrics. Where latter Sith reveled in galactic conquest and displays of raw power, the Lost Tribe revered precision, secrecy, and inevitability. Their reverence for the blade was so deep that it became a ritual object, reserved for moments of profound symbolic importance. And there was no greater target in their eyes than Luke Skywalker, the man who represented everything they despised and everything that they feared. He was the greatest living threat the Sith had ever seen. He had destroyed Palpatine, survived the dark side, rebuilt the Jedi Order without succumbing to corruption of the old order. It is true to defeat Luke openly would have granted them honor. To defeat him in battle would have immortalized anyone. But to erase him silently, efficiently, and without ceremony, that would have been the ultimate act of dominance. And that is why the Shikkar was chosen. When the Sith struck, they did not intend spectacle. They intended simply to kill. A blade meant to slip unseen, to shatter the Grandmaster's body from within, and to end the greatest Jedi of all time. To end Luke without a duel, without witnesses, and to end his legacy. It was meant to prove that the most powerful Force wielder in history would be reduced to nothing more than another body claimed by the mind of the Sith. But history did not bend that way. Luke Skywalker survived the attempt. The Shikkar failed to claim him, and in doing so, it marked the final failure of the weapon. What had once been the ultimate symbol of dominance was exposed as a relic of an older order, a crumbling ideology, one unable to overcome a Jedi who had transcended all fear for them. In the end, the blade did not end the Jedi. It only proved that the Sith, for all of their cunning, were still bound by the very traditions that had always doomed them. What I've always found most fascinating about the Shikkar is how it completely contrasts with everything the Sith claimed to value. For a culture obsessed with power and spectacle, the idea that one of their most feared weapons is small, fragile, and unassuming feels poetic. The Sith forged colossal superweapons, conquered entire planets, and reveled in displays of overwhelming force. Yet the weapon that terrified them was a thin shard of glass, designed not to win in open battle, but to end a life quietly. It's the ultimate contradiction, and that's exactly why I love it. There's something deeply symbolic about the fact that the weapon is fragile by design. It shatters on impact, just as the Sith's belief in their own invulnerability ultimately does as well. It forces its victim to confront the truth in their final moment, that for all of their power, all of their ambition, and all of their cruelty, that it could not save them from their death. It presented no grand duel, no legacy-defining final moment or word, just the realization that they were never as untouchable as they believed. These weapons come to us through the fate of the Jedi series, a time where an older, stranger, and more alien vision of the Sith emerged once more. A remnant of a more forgotten age, and through them we glimpse a version of the dark side that is ancient and unsettlingly deliberate. If you want to explore more of these weapons, forgotten rites, and the hidden philosophies that shape the darkest corners of Sith history, then follow along, subscribe, and step deeper into the knowledge that many have sought to erase, secrets buried in the dark. But wherever your path may lead you next, may the Force guide you, and have a great day.